We're done. Get out, my boyfriend said coldly. So I left that night. 6 weeks later, he messaged me, "Where's your half of the bills?" I replied, "Didn't know exes split rent." Then it got messy. Hi Reddit. I'm 33F, and I've been holding on to this for a while now. It's one of those stories that still has me half laughing, half staring at the ceiling wondering how I didn't see it coming. There's some family drama, some petty behavior, and a lot of misplaced entitlement. I guess I'm just hoping that writing this all out will help me finally process how things fell apart and how I somehow became the villain in a story where all I ever did was try to build something stable. So, to set the stage a bit, I lived with my boyfriend Ethan, 34M, for a little under 2 years. We'd been dating a little over 3 years by the time everything fell apart, but those first couple of years, they really had me fooled. Ethan was calm, kind in that low-effort kind of way, and seemed to have his life together. He wasn't loud or dramatic, didn't party much, didn't have a bunch of exes popping in and out. He was one of those quiet guys that people just assumed was responsible and level-headed. We met through mutual friends at a low-key birthday thing. He made a dry joke about the cake. I laughed too hard, and things kind of flowed from there. I remember feeling, even in those early weeks, like I could breathe around him. He wasn't intense or emotionally chaotic like my last boyfriend. I just turned 30 back then, and I was looking for peace, not passion. Ethan seemed safe, solid, like someone I could build a future with. Things moved slowly at first. We dated for about a year before we started talking about moving in together. Rent in our city isn't cheap, and I was living alone in a small studio that I loved but could barely afford. Ethan had a 2-bedroom apartment in a quiet neighborhood, close to both of our jobs. The idea came up gradually, first as a casual, "you're basically here all the time anyway" kind of thing, and then with more structure. We agreed we'd split everything down the middle. Rent, utilities, groceries. I was making less than him, but I didn't want that to be a problem. My parents raised me to be financially independent. Asking for help was never something I was comfortable with. So I moved in. At first, it was fine. Ethan was neat in the common areas but a little messy in his personal space. Nothing outrageous. He'd forget to take out the trash or leave laundry sitting for a few days, but nothing I couldn't live with. I had my own little office set up in the second bedroom for my design work, and he had a decent setup in the living room for his job in IT. We didn't argue much. It wasn't a storybook romance, but it was steady, predictable. And then Talia happened. Talia is Ethan's younger sister. She's 29, but you'd think she was still 17 the way she carried herself. The kind of person who talked a lot about energy and vibes, but never seemed to hold a job for more than 6 months. She bounced between friends' couches, part-time gigs, and soul-searching trips that no one ever really understood. I met her a few times early on in our relationship. She was friendly in that overly familiar way, hugging you too long, asking personal questions a few minutes after meeting, laughing just a little too hard at her own jokes. Ethan always talked about her like she was this free spirit who'd been misunderstood all her life. I chalked it up to sibling loyalty and didn't give it much thought. But then one day, she showed up at our apartment with 2 mismatched suitcases and a plastic tub filled with what I assumed was laundry. I was coming home from a grocery run and nearly tripped over her stuff in the hallway. She looked up at me from the couch, where she was sitting barefoot with one leg tucked under her, scrolling through her phone like she owned the place. "Oh, hey." Ethan said I could stay for a little while. That was the first I'd heard of it. I stood there for a second, bags in hand, waiting for her to laugh or say she was kidding. She didn't. Instead, she glanced back down at her phone and asked if we had almond milk. Not, "Hi." Not, "Is this okay?" Just, "Almond milk." When I asked Ethan about it later that night, he brushed it off. "She's just having a rough time. It's only for a few days." Apparently, she'd been evicted. Again. This time for disagreements with the landlord, which I later found out was code for not paying rent for 3 months and ignoring repeated notices. I wasn't thrilled, but I tried to be understanding. I told Ethan we needed to set some ground rules. She needed to help out around the apartment, buy her own groceries, respect the shared spaces. He nodded along, agreed with everything, and then nothing changed. She stayed longer than a few days. A week turned into 2, and then suddenly we were 4 weeks in, and she hadn't so much as wiped down a counter. She took over the second bedroom, which meant I was now working from the dining table, dodging her cat. Yes, she brought a cat, and trying to stay focused while she watched loud videos on her phone all afternoon. I tried to talk to Ethan again. "She's just adjusting." It's not easy, you know? She's dealing with anxiety. So was I. Little things started to pile up. My moisturizer disappeared. She borrowed it and then used half the bottle in 2 days. I found her wearing one of my scarves, one that had sentimental value, and when I said something, she smiled and said, "Oh, I thought it was just sitting there." She left dishes in the sink, wet towels on the bathroom floor, and once I even caught her using my work laptop to stream something. She didn't ask, didn't apologize, just shrugged and said she didn't think I'd mind. Every conversation with Ethan turned into me being too sensitive or not empathetic enough. One night, I tried to bring up the office situation again. I needed that space. I was on deadline for a big project and working from the table wasn't cutting it. Talia walked in halfway through the conversation and laughed. "You need a whole room just to draw pictures? Must be nice." I didn't say anything. I just walked out and stayed at my friend Kaya's for the night. When I came back the next morning, nothing had changed. Ethan barely looked up from his computer when I came in. Talia was in the kitchen, drinking from my mug. Her cat sprawled across the table like it paid rent. I knew then that something had shifted. Or maybe it had been shifting for a while and I just hadn't wanted to see it. So, a few weeks after I'd come back from Kaya's, things felt muted, cold. Ethan and I weren't fighting exactly, but we weren't talking either. Not really. Conversations were clipped, practical. "Can you grab more paper towels? Do you need the car tomorrow?" Your package came. Everything in between, the warmth, the shared inside jokes, the way we used to watch documentaries and pause them every 5 minutes to debate something pointless, gone. He didn't touch me. Didn't ask how my day was. Didn't even look at me for more than a second at a time. It felt like I was renting a room from a stranger. Meanwhile, Talia acted like she was the queen of the apartment. She started making little changes, moving furniture, rearranging the pantry, throwing out expired items that I knew weren't expired. One day I came home and she'd moved my plants to make room for what she called her meditation altar. Just a bunch of crystals, a feather, and a candle that smelled like burnt plastic. When I moved my plants back, she rolled her eyes and muttered, "Some people don't understand energy flow." But the part that really made my skin crawl was how close she was getting to Ethan. Not just sibling close, but possessive. Weirdly possessive. She'd sit next to him on the couch with her legs tucked up like a child, constantly touching his arm, laughing a little too hard at things that weren't even funny. She started calling him Effie, which I'd never heard before, and she used it constantly. Loudly. I don't want to jump to conclusions about things I didn't see directly, but it didn't feel like a sister just being close to her brother. It felt like she was trying to claim space. Like she needed me to know she was the one he was choosing now. Not me. One night, I came home late from a project meeting, and they were on the couch watching a movie. My throw blanket, one my grandmother made, was on her lap, and my favorite mug was on the coffee table with lipstick on the rim. She was wearing one of Ethan's shirts, and her feet were on his legs. Ethan didn't even blink when I walked in. Didn't greet me. Talia just looked at me, smiled with her eyes half closed, and said, "We started without you." I didn't reply. I went to the bathroom, shut the door, and stared at my reflection for what felt like hours. I tried to talk to Ethan the next day. Not to accuse, not to fight, just to talk. I said, "I don't feel like I live here anymore. I feel like I'm intruding." He rubbed his temples and sighed, like I was burdening him. "You're always so dramatic lately." I asked, "Can we just revisit the idea of her finding a new place? This isn't working." He didn't even look at me when he said, "She's my family." I said, "So am I." Or I thought I was. He didn't respond. That was the moment I think I started emotionally disconnecting. I still hoped things could be repaired somehow, but the part of me that loved him unconditionally started to go quiet. Then came the final straw. A Thursday night. Mid-April. I remember because it had rained all afternoon, and I was still damp from walking back from the subway. I walked into the apartment and noticed a few things right away. My desk, my actual desk, was gone. Not just rearranged or moved. Gone. The second bedroom, my office, was cleared out. In its place, a clothing rack. A tall mirror. Makeup scattered across the windowsill. Talia had turned it into her personal dressing room. I stood there frozen. When I asked Ethan where my desk was, he didn't even get up from the couch. It was taking up space. "You weren't really using it." I said, "I work from home. I use it every day." He replied, flatly, "You seemed fine working from the kitchen." I stared at him. "Did you even ask me?" He shrugged. "It's just furniture." "No," I said. "It's not just furniture. It's my space. My things." I pay half the rent here. You don't get to decide what happens to my stuff without telling me. He finally stood up, slowly. You're making this into something it's not. Talia walked out of the bedroom just then, wearing one of my sweaters. A soft pale blue one I'd only worn twice. It looked wrinkled and stretched at the shoulders. Oh, she said, fake surprised. I didn't know you were home. I looked at Ethan. Take it off, I said quietly. Talia tilted her head. Excuse me. I said take off my sweater. She smiled at Ethan like it was a joke. Like I was the difficult one. You're being really intense right now. I turned back to Ethan. This isn't working. You know that, right? This isn't normal. He looked at me like I was a stranger. And then, with no emotion, no raised voice, no anger, he said, we're done. Get out. Just like that. Like a command. Not, I think we need to take a break. Not, let's talk about this. No, we're done. Get out. I remember standing there with rainwater still dripping from my coat sleeves, and something in me just stilled. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just turned and went to the bedroom. I packed one bag. Essentials only. As I zipped it up, I saw my sketchbooks still stacked on the nightstand. I took them too. I left that night and stayed with Kaya. 6 weeks passed. Silence. No calls. No messages. No, how are you? And then, suddenly, one message. Where's your half of the bills? That was all it said. No greeting. No explanation. I stared at it for a long time before replying. Didn't know exes split rent. I thought that would be the end of it. It wasn't. The message Ethan sent, where's your half of the bills, landed in my inbox like a stone dropped in still water. Even though I'd already grieved the relationship in those 6 quiet weeks, something about his tone, his audacity, pulled a heat up from my chest I hadn't felt in a long time. I didn't respond right away. I waited. I wanted to see if maybe he'd realize how absurd he sounded. But the next morning, I got another message. Internet and electric are both due. You still owe for the first week of May. I'd left on April 29th. Not even a full week into the month. And here he was, demanding I pay utilities for a home I wasn't allowed to live in. For electricity that Talia used to power her ring light and space heater and humidifier. For internet I hadn't touched since he told me to get out. That's when I realized something deeper. He wasn't just asking for money. He was trying to rewrite the narrative. To him, it wasn't that he'd kicked me out. It was that I'd left. That I'd abandoned my responsibilities. That he, the noble older brother and provider, was now stuck cleaning up the mess I'd made. And he was going to make me look bad for it. I responded simply, you told me to leave. That ends my share of the bills. Please don't message me again unless it's important. I thought that would be it. But Ethan wasn't done. Not by a long shot. 3 days later, I got an email. A formal-looking one. Subject line, outstanding shared financial obligations. He'd written out a list. Rent, internet, power, gas, cleaning supplies. A new desk for Talia's room. That one made my jaw lock. Even the groceries I hadn't eaten, were itemized, down to a loaf of bread and a box of cereal. The total? $763.48. And just to add insult to injury, he attached a spreadsheet with color-coded cells and a note at the bottom. Please remit payment via Venmo or Zelle within 5 business days. Unpaid balances may be referred to small claims court. Small claims court. I stared at the screen for a full minute. And then, slowly, I smiled. Because in that moment, I realized something. I didn't have to play defense. I knew Ethan. I knew how much he cared about appearances, about seeming reasonable and fair. He was the kind of guy who needed everyone to believe he was the one holding things together. But now he'd written it down, proof that he'd kicked me out, that I hadn't left willingly. He was asking me to pay for furniture he'd bought after I left, for utilities I hadn't used. And he'd sent it all from his work email. So I did what any designer with a good memory and a folder full of receipts would do. I started documenting. I pulled up my lease, which we had both signed. His name and mine, side by side. I highlighted the section about tenant responsibilities and shared expenses. I went back through my bank account, logging every grocery bill, every utility transfer, every payment I'd made since moving in. Then I opened a new document, titled Shared Expenses and Financial Contributions, Breakdown, October 2022 to April 2025, and I got to work. But before I sent anything back to Ethan, something else happened. Something that turned this from a breakup squabble into full-blown family warfare. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was at Kaya's place, finishing up my report, when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. Voicemail. I almost deleted it, but curiosity got the better of me. The voice on the recording was calm, polite, cold. "Hello, this is Mary Ann, Ethan's mother. I understand you've chosen to leave the apartment and relationship with my son. That's your right. However, I think it's only fair that you continue contributing to the household expenses until Ethan finds a new roommate. He's under enough pressure supporting Talia, and your sudden departure has made things unnecessarily difficult. I hope you'll do the right thing." No hello, no concern, just expectation. Mary Ann had always been distant when I was with Ethan. She rarely visited, rarely called. But now that I was out of the picture, she suddenly had time for lengthy voicemails. I played it twice, just to make sure I wasn't mishearing. She wasn't trying to reason with me. She was asserting control. They really believed I would fold. And that's when I decided this wasn't just about rent anymore. This was about drawing a line between what I gave and what they took. So I responded, not to her, yet, but to Ethan. "Hi, Ethan. Attached is a detailed breakdown of all shared financial contributions I've made since moving in. You'll notice I've contributed equally, often more, to rent, utilities, and groceries, despite not having equal access to the space during Talia's stay. You'll also find screenshots of my April rent payment and my move-out date. As for the new furniture and groceries purchased after April 29th, I won't be covering those. They were your decisions made after our relationship ended. If you wish to pursue legal action, I'm prepared to bring documentation and testimony. Please direct any future communication through email only. I'll no longer respond to personal messages." Marin, I pressed send. It should have ended there. But Mary Ann didn't take the hint. A week later, I received a letter. Not typed, handwritten, on thick, floral stationery with an embossed M at the top. Inside were 2 pages, front and back, of polite accusations, veiled insults, and the implication that I had taken advantage of Ethan's generosity and disrupted the balance of their home. She even wrote, in perfectly looped script, "You were never quite a fit for this family. I hope you find something better suited to your temperament." I read that line 3 times. Then I folded the letter, placed it back in the envelope, and slid it into a drawer. Because I wasn't going to reply with another letter. No, I had something better in mind. If Ethan and his family wanted to turn this into a formal affair, voicemails, spreadsheets, letters, then I'd match their tone, but not on their terms. When I first noticed the subletting clause in our lease, I didn't think much of it. But after that letter from Mary Ann, full of elegant slights and rebranded entitlement, I started looking at it differently. The clause read, "No resident may permit long-term guests to reside in the apartment for a period exceeding 14 consecutive days without written permission from the landlord." Talia had been there for over 2 months. No permission, no rental agreement, no lease addendum, nothing. So I emailed our landlord. I explained that I had moved out due to a domestic separation and that a non-tenant, Talia, had effectively taken over my space. I said I was concerned about liability and the fact that my name was still on the lease. I attached screenshots of Talia's mail piling up at the apartment, photos from her social media taken in her new room, and even clips from an apartment walkthrough video she'd made and shared online, proudly narrating the features of my new space in the city. The landlord, Mr. Singh, replied within 24 hours, "Thank you for informing us. There is no approved subtenant listed for the unit. This is a lease violation. We will be conducting a compliance inspection this week." That email was the first domino point. 2 days later, I got a very different message from Ethan.it. Was a short email. "You didn't have to go behind my back. You could have just told me you wanted her out." I didn't reply. I had already tried being reasonable. That path had long since closed. Then Mr. Singh called me. He told me that during the inspection, Talia had insisted she wasn't living there, despite her name being on a package by the door and her belongings occupying what used to be my office. Ethan stood by silently. Apparently, the landlord issued a written warning. He gave Ethan 2 weeks to either add Talia formally to the lease, which came with a background check, higher rent, and a list of restrictions, or have her move out. That same week, I received another email. This one from Mary Ann again, short. No loops or pleasantries this time. This was a low move. I expected more from you. But the thing is, I had given more. For months, I had shown patience, grace, communication, and compromise. I had asked. I had explained. And I had been pushed out, piece by piece, by people who treated decency like it was optional. So no, it wasn't a low move. It was a quiet line drawn in a storm of noise. Talia moved out a week later. She posted about it vaguely on her social media. When people try to drag you down, elevate higher. You don't need to stay where you're not appreciated. Ethan didn't say anything. Not to me, not publicly. He started deleting photos, muted accounts, disconnected. Just like that, I visited the apartment once more, 3 weeks later, with the landlord present, to collect the last of my things. Mr. Singh stood with me while I gathered a few books, a lamp, and the old desk chair that had been shoved in the hallway. Ethan wasn't there. I didn't expect him to be. The place felt hollow, like someone had tried to redecorate over a crack in the wall without fixing what was beneath. The energy was stale, quiet, uncertain. That I signed the paperwork removing my name from the lease and left. And that was it for now. I moved into a small, bright apartment on the other side of the city. It's older, and the pipes hum in the winter, but it's mine. Fully mine. No one rearranges my furniture. No one wears my sweaters or touches my desk. Kaya helped me repaint the kitchen. We put up plants and postcards, and sometimes, when the windows are open, we sit at the table and talk about how sometimes losing what feels familiar is the best possible gift, because it clears the way for something steady, something kind. Ethan never messaged me again. Neither did Marion. I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan moved out 2 months after Talia left. Apparently, he's living with a friend now, back to figuring things out. I'm not angry anymore, but I am clear. The real victory wasn't making them uncomfortable. That it was choosing not to carry their chaos with me when I left. And that's the kind of quiet revenge that actually lasts. The landlord, Mr. Singh, replied within 24 hours. Thank you for informing us. There is no approved subtenant listed for the unit. This is a lease violation. We will be conducting a compliance inspection this week. I stared at the message for a long moment, not because I was surprised, but because it felt like a shift. A quiet, mechanical click of gears beginning to turn, a process I had only nudged forward, now picking up its own momentum. That email was the first domino. 2 days later, Ethan finally broke his silence. His message was terse, just one sentence, carefully vague, but laced with the usual subtle deflection. You didn't have to go behind my back. You could have just told me you wanted her out. I didn't reply. There was nothing to say that hadn't already been said, and frankly, I wasn't in the business of explaining the obvious anymore. I had tried reason, tried conversation, even compromise. That road had long since collapsed behind us. Then, the next afternoon, my phone rang. It was Mr. Singh. He sounded polite, but also quietly irritated, the way someone does when they've seen a situation like this one too many times. He told me he had gone to the apartment that morning, unannounced but within his rights, to conduct the inspection. According to him, Talia answered the door in a large hoodie and slippers, blinking like she'd just woken up. She told him, unprompted, that she wasn't living there, just visiting a lot. Mr. Singh said the words came out rehearsed, like she'd been coached. But then he saw the package by the door with her full name on it. Not Ethan's. Hers. Her shoes lined up neatly by the coat rack. Her framed photo sitting on what had once been my desk. A towel hanging in the bathroom. The same lavender color she used in the guest room when she first visited. The room that had been mine, now rearranged with floral bedding and a wall calendar filled with her schedule. Ethan stood off to the side during the inspection, apparently quiet, answering only what he was asked. Mr. Singh said he didn't argue, didn't interrupt. He just kept his hands in his pockets and let the silence do the talking. The landlord issued a written warning that same day. The lease, he explained, did not permit guests to occupy the apartment for extended periods without formal documentation. Talia was not on the lease, and there had been no request to add her. He gave Ethan 2 choices. Either go through the proper process of applying to add Talia as a tenant, which included a background check, increased rent, and adherence to building policy, or she would need to move out within 14 days. That same week, another message came through, this time from Marianne. It was different from her last one. Short. No graceful phrasing. No decorative sentences. Just plain script, clipped tone. This was a low move. I expected more from you. That line stayed with me, not because it hurt, but because it revealed so much. It didn't ask questions. It didn't offer curiosity or concern. It just scolded, as if I had broken some unspoken rule of obedience. But the thing is, I had already given more. More patience, more understanding, more benefit of the doubt than anyone reasonably should. I had explained my discomfort. I had communicated my needs. I had adjusted, flexed, and made space until there was none left for me. Piece by piece, they had shown me what I was worth to them. And now that I was no longer convenient, now that I had acted on my own behalf, they wanted to call it low. No, it wasn't low. It was a line, drawn cleanly in the sand. And I wasn't the one who crossed it. Talia moved out a week later. She didn't message me. She didn't apologize or explain. But I did see the post, a passive-aggressive note on her public page with a selfie in front of a new apartment window, captioned, "When people try to drag you down, elevate higher. You don't need to stay where you're not appreciated." It was almost funny, as if she had been the one displaced, as if the last 3 months hadn't revolved around her comfort, her presence, her needs. That post wasn't for her followers. It was for me. Ethan never commented on it. In fact, in the days that followed, I noticed he began quietly erasing our shared digital history. Photos archived, relationship status removed. His profile turned blank and distant, like a place that had been scrubbed clean. He muted my accounts. I didn't block him. I didn't need to. He had nothing else to say. 3 weeks later, I returned to the apartment one final time. I had arranged it with Mr. Singh in advance. I wanted to retrieve the last of my things, a small bookshelf, a reading lamp, and the desk chair I'd bought with my first paycheck from the design firm. Mr. Singh met me there, waiting by the entrance with a clipboard in hand. Ethan wasn't home. I hadn't expected him to be. The apartment felt smaller somehow. Not physically. The walls were the same, the layout unchanged, but something had settled over it. A quiet stillness. Like it had swallowed too much conflict and now didn't know what to do with itself. My old room had been stripped. No pictures, no plants, no signs of personality. The walls were blank again, but they held a different kind of emptiness now, one that no amount of rearranging could cover up. Mr. Singh and I finished our walkthrough. I signed the final paperwork, removing my name from the lease. He shook my hand and said, "You're free now," with a kind smile that I hadn't realized I needed. I stepped outside and didn't look back. Today, I live on the other side of the city in a small, third-floor walk-up that hums when the pipes warm. It's nothing fancy. The tiles are older, the windows rattle in the wind, and the floors creak when I move at night. But it's mine. Every inch of it is mine. Kaya helped me repaint the kitchen. We picked a soft sage green and added a little chalkboard by the pantry for notes and doodles. There are postcards on the fridge from friends. A little plant shelf in the window that catches the light at noon. No one moves my things. No one oversteps. My sweaters stay where I leave them. My notebooks are just mine. My quiet is respected. Sometimes Kaya comes over and we drink tea and talk. About work. About healing. About how sometimes what we think is loss is really just the start of return. Back to ourselves. To peace. Ethan never contacted me again. Neither did Marianne. I heard through a mutual friend that Ethan ended up moving out a few months later. He's renting a basement room from a college buddy now, apparently figuring things out again. Talia is back in their hometown, working part-time and in between plans. As for me, I'm not angry anymore. But I am clear. Clear about what I deserve. Clear about the quiet ways people show you who they are. Clear about how subtle control can dress itself in family ties and shared rent. And most of all, clear that real revenge, the kind that matters, isn't about making a scene. It's about building a life so full and honest that the noise behind you doesn't even echo. And that's the kind of ending that actually lasts.